Hello everyone. I wanted to do a little breakdown, maybe a bit of a further breakdown than I have before, about kind of this interesting idea I had in the middle of 6 a.m. in the morning when I woke up. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to make an ASCII character map effect. And we could see it here. I have a bunch of portrait textures, and you can see here it will kind of like map out the ASCII textures to the portrait. Where it's lighter, where it's darker, and yeah, it just makes some interesting effects. What I can control here, I control the amount, the pixelation amount, so we can change it to be, you know, 128, and then it'll be very detailed, like this. And I could change that texture again to show you what that might look like on the other ones. Pretty interesting effects. And it's all using basically a single texture that will map this, and I'll go over how I accomplish that. And yeah, we'll get right to it. So let me break it down into a smaller pixelation amount because it kind of helps me. I'll go to 16, which doesn't really show well in the image here. But basically the concept is I took apart kind of a flipbook, the standard flipbook node here, and just used sort of the rows and columns sections of it. And what I did was I created a texture where I wanted each row to kind of be a different value, essentially. So the top row would be a lighter amounts of white, so this is for kind of the darker areas. This second row here would be a little bit more white, and then kind of it goes all the way down to like these are very more whitish characters that fill up the space. So I wanted to make a texture that I could gradate down. So essentially I kind of go back to the beginning here, and I'll put in 0 for both. So what I needed to do is I needed to get the texture to essentially, now let's actually kill this over here. I don't want that, so we'll plug in the final color. I needed to get the texture to kind of create, if you're between 0 and 0.25, it will show this row. If you're in between 0 and, or 0.25 and 5, it should show this row. When you're 0.5 and 0.75, it should show this row and 0.75. So it's basically chopping this up into 4 sections between 0 and 1. So as this goes down, it should show more. And to get that, I basically had to, kind of apply some things on I add some pixelation and I divide columns and rows, but essentially is I need to get this to show up everywhere. And so if I remove the math that I did to figure that out, I believe it's this. So yeah, this is kind of what the repeating texture would look like, right? Where it's showing the texture constantly repeating. But what I wanted to actually do is only if I'm between 0 and 1, it will show the different rows. So basically I took the flipbook nodes, I took it out so it will actually shift which row is on top. So 0 here, that 0 row is on top. If I say 0.3, it should show, yeah, it shows that second line on top. When I show 0.6, it should show the third line on top, and 1 right would show the top line on top. So that's basically what the flipbook texture is doing, right? The flipbook texture plus me pixelating it further should show which row I want kind of on top. And that's correct. But what I need to do is I need to fill the entire texture with only the top row here. And so I did that with a fmod and a couple of steps over here and some lerps and some offsets. So kind of you can see what I'm doing is each time I'm doing this, I'm shifting and masking out different rows to get the UVs to line up. So here I have the first 2 rows are now correct, but now I need to fix the bottom 2, and then when I do this lerp, then the other two rows are correct, and then this one, and then this lerp handles the last one. So essentially, I'm making a bunch of Fmod masks, and then I will apply those masks with some UV offsets that will shift the rows. That's essentially what this is doing. It's you know, kind of finding and creating these rows and shifts. So now when I do this, this should basically show me exactly what I have. So if I have 0, it should show the first row only. If I have 0.25, it should show me the second row. If I have 0.5, it should show me the third row, and 0.75, it should show me the last row. And then this goes from 0.75 all the way to 1, right? So this is exactly the same. Now, the other thing that's, so if you then just plug in a grayscale texture, so I'm taking an initial texture here, it's a color texture, and I'm just maxing out the RGB channels so that it's a grayscale texture. If we take a look at this, it's essentially just kind of like grayscaling. Oh, right, and I pixelated over here. I pixelated to the exact same amount that I have pixelated this part, so that it will line up. I'll show you what it looks like without it. But if I plug this into the amount, basically it will then map out the grays, and I probably need to up the pixelation quite a bit so we can see it. I don't know, 64. So anything that is a white will be this, and anything that's dark will be the dark ones, and so it kind of like remaps all the grayscale values to those rows here, right? But if you don't do the pixelation effect, it will have some interesting kind of like clipping here where you could see the characters are clipping in on each other. So you want to pixelate it to the same amount that you are going to apply this effect on it. And then you get it so that every character is in its own little spots in space. So that's essentially kind of how that worked. But the problem here is you could see it's repeating. It's got like repeating rows. It looks like a pattern. And so the other thing I wanted to do was randomize which thing will show. So if we go back to 16 and I just put in regular old 1 here and 1, what I need to do is I want to randomize in the X which column will show up. So I have a random that gets pixelated to my amounts. I'm creating, this is using IQ's #3, which is a bunch of XOR shifts, I believe, or bitwise operations. I don't even know. I'm not that great at programming. So this essentially is going to give us a random ID mask that is that means that these are all random numbers between 0 and 1. And what I can do is then I can plug that in into the X coordinate up here. So I created a reroute node, and then that should actually randomize which one of these will show up. And that's how easy that was. So now when I plug the max back in for here, we should now get the let's change it up to 64. We'll do with and without. So now it will randomly offset, randomly put like which of these columns is going to show up. So it's not always in the same pattern anymore. And that is, so if I don't do that and I just have this in both, you can see then it looks like it's a pattern across, but if I put in random, now it will randomly mix it up. And some of the fun final couple things here, like I had a fun moving little texture here, so you can kind of see how that looks. This is random noise moving, so you could see this move across. You can have a more saturated map here, where I'm gonna just plug this in, and you can kind of clamp your ranges and make a more saturated mask, and then we could mask that out here. So we could see, you know, it's masking out kind of like a posterizing it. We could then subtract that to time, and it could animate on and off. Oh, interesting. It's using this instead of the other one, but that's a cool effect. Yeah, if you kept the same grayscale value in both, now it's animating on and off the effect here. But if you want to see it with the portrait, you can see it with the portrait in both. So yeah, that's an interesting effect. Now you can go crazy and use SDF shapes, sign distance field shapes, instead of the texture map here. So that's kind of over here. We could take a look at what that looks like. Here's using a circles. And I'm multiplying by like the grayscale values here. So the circle is getting multiplied by the grayscale value. But then you could plug interesting things here, like this into the size of the circle. And that would then change, like, if it's darker, it's going to be a smaller circle size. If it's more bright, it'll be a lighter circle size. And again, the pixelation here can be changed to 32, and then we have it more, you know. The sky's the limit for what's possible here. Here's a parallelogram where it looks like the width and the height are determined by the grayscale values. So if I plug that in, that then turns these parallelograms, so they're taller the more bright it is, and then the less bright the texture is, they're smaller. So this could apply for anything. You could swap out this texture to be anything. You could use sign distance field shapes instead. And then the final little bit here is applying the color back into it. And I think this gives the coolest effect, is adding this cool little color amount here. Just because I haven't seen it before, and I thought it was super interesting. So 32. I really like it kind of more chunky. And we can flip through the couple of portraits and just see how they look. So this one's kind of dark in the middle. This one's got a lot of greens and darkness. This one is backlit, so you can see, like, it's really looks like a strong profile contrast. It's really interesting. And I think my favorite is kind of this one that just is really eye-catching. I think the poppy colors really work well with the less pixelization. So that is essentially kind of the breakdown of this effect. And yeah, it was really fun to work on, really interesting to work out and kind of play with. And yeah, here's it kind of, you know, popping with the color in and out. Boop. So cool, interesting things here. But you can actually take this into the 3D landscape if you wanted. This was just done on 2D textures, but you actually can turn this kind of into a 3D concept as well. So I'm applying the same concept here, but instead it's in a 3D map. So I have that same random, and here I'm using screen aligned UVs. You don't have to, but it's kind of my preferred method. Even though it looks like it's swimming, I think I prefer this to the regular UVs. So I do my pixelation amount. I'm doing that exact same Fmod stuff, getting it to work with the texture here. And here is just applying the lighting. So this is kind of splitting the lighting into a Well, it's also doing random. I should probably preview this. This is taking the dot product of where the lights are and where the vertices are. So if you change the lighting, it basically splits the lighting so you know where the lighting is coming from. And then I'm using random here to randomly pick which texture is being shown. So if I don't do that, and we just have it in here, it essentially will always be the same repeating pattern again. You can see it's like constantly repeating it the same pattern, but when you again apply random in the x coordinate, it will then shift it around. And the rest of the material is almost exactly the same as the 2D version of it. I added a little switch that can invert it if I want to, so I could flip it to white. And yeah, 0 on everything else. This is both in the emissive and the base color, but if you don't do that, I guess I'll show what that looks like here. So this is with it both in the emissive and without. You can see the interesting effects, like you get a little bit of the shadow over here and here. When you actually have 0 in the emissive, you'll get much more dramatic shadows. But Lumen, because this is Unreal 5, comes into play. So you might get some interesting global illumination that you might not want if you don't disable Lumen right up. This is like a vanilla Unreal. But yeah, you can see the shadows are much more dramatic. And here's like a little bit of Lumen coming in, reflecting off stuff. So just multiple ways to deal with all sorts of fun effects, screen effects. This could be a post-processing shader, but I put it on per material instead. That's just my preferred method when I'm working on this kind of stuff. But anyway, taking a concept that I woke up in the morning, thought I wanted to do it this way, and then turning it into 3D and seeing kind of what that looked like too. So, fun concept, and hopefully you can take this as inspiration and do cool things with it. So yeah, the one final thing is I'll just show off what the circles look like here multiplied with the color. I think it looks really dynamic and interesting. Oh yeah, here's parallelograms. But the circle, just think it's a really interesting effect, and yeah, works great with pop colors. So hope you guys learned something and enjoy, and yeah,